All right, seeing none, we're moving to the other item on our agenda, summer reading program. Tim Walsh asked about this.
Kristen, can you address that comment, please?
Me, I'll set it up since I didn't realize we cut it out last year because apparently my son had one of the few courses that had reading. But I did know this year when I asked him, he said, no, there's no reading anymore. So I was kind of surprised we cut the program, and I was curious why we did that.
So the goal of summer reading, the initiative is to encourage all students to read one book over the summer so that, they retain and enhance their reading skills, but also hopefully to develop, foster an interest in reading. Summer reading isn't considered part of the curriculum because students have, for a lot of the courses, students have choice in that content, and there's no specific skills that are tied back to the course objectives for that course. It's specifically just to encourage students to read over the summer. And so for the past 20 or so years, in talking to some of the English teachers, we've had summer reading information provided to the students. And then through that period, on and off, it's been required of all students. And so currently we have it required for our AP English courses, AP Literature and AP Language. And the reason that it's been required on and off is because of the same problems that we're experiencing now. And so each time it's been brought back, they've tried a bunch of different ways to encourage more students to read, and ultimately they haven't been successful. So some of the problems that we're currently encountering is that 60% of the students were not reading and starting off with a failing grade, because the assessment in the past has been 5% of the grade, and it was 5% because you want to make it worth enough so that students feel that they should read, but you don't want to penalize them too much. But it is problematic because it puts students in a position where it's very difficult for them to dig them out of that hole. And students knew they needed to read. They knew that their grade would be penalized, but it wasn't an immediate consequence in June or July when they chose not to read that book. And so they don't feel that until August or even September. And the other issue that we're facing is we have over 60 transfer students, and a lot of those transfer students that we call transfer students still start in that first couple of days of our school. And so those are students who didn't even have the opportunity to read. And so for teachers, it would be hard to include a discussion in their class and incorporate it into their classroom, because you have the handful of students that are coming from our school and didn't read, and then you also have the handful of transfer students, and so you do have several students in your class that haven't read the book. We have already tried several solutions and continue to do additional work on this to achieve the goal of getting students to read over the summer. One thing that we have been playing around with is providing students with choice, thinking that it would help. So I know back in 2010 when they did it, they gave students a variety of different choices, and they just had an open-ended writing assignment. And that was really difficult for the teachers to grade, especially in the first 2 weeks when they want to get to know those students and focus on the instruction in their classroom. And so then we limited down to about 2 choices, and in some courses a little more, so that we could develop multiple choice tests and have students take those. But again, the ultimate result is, that assessment is not, encouraging students to read. We've also last year provided books that were recommended by the staff, thinking that, if a student saw a book on a list and they had a good relationship with a staff member, they would be more inclined to read that book. And so this year what we decided to do was create 2 different lists. One list was a list for college-bound students, which were really rigorous reads and that are currently not part of our English curriculum. And then also just high-interest reads that we thought students would be interested in because they're recommended by the American Library Association, and they're more page-turners, but just to still encourage students to read. On that list, we also included Lexile levels, which just talks about the readability of the book. And so that way, a student wasn't picking up a book and realizing it was way too difficult and then being discouraged and putting it down. So we tried to explain that and use that as a guide in picking the book. So ultimately, our goal with summer reading is to look for a different structure to accomplish the goal of having students read over the summer. So we've already reached out to other schools. So most schools seem to be experiencing the same problem that we are facing. We've discussed all of the ideas that we've gotten within the English department, as well as the suggestions that we've gotten from parents. We have a few ideas that we're looking at already for next year. One is partnering with our local libraries and the PTO to provide incentives so that instead of it being punitive, it's a very positive experience. So ultimately, we believe that students should be reading over the summer. We want students to be reading over the summer, but we acknowledge that the current structure that we have in place is just not being successful. So we're looking for another structure to encourage more students to read.
Thank you.
Any questions for Kristen on this?